Jesus in My Life, episode 91.
So I started climbing up the ladder, and as soon as I reached over and grabbed the rails, I did not realize that one of the wires from the pole was touching the rail. So when I grabbed it, I grounded myself. So here I am hanging there. I'm feeling like numb throughout my body. I cannot even swallow my saliva, and I'm screaming for my mom to come.
Welcome to Jesus in My Life, a podcast with Rob and Jack, where we interview everyday people like me and you about their extraordinary experiences with our Savior, Jesus Christ. Welcome to another episode of Jesus in My Life podcast. This is your host, Jack, with my co-host, Rob.
Hey, everybody. It's great to be with you today and looking forward to today's episode.
Yeah, well, we have in studio today Daniel. Daniel is a friend of mine who I met through my son. He was over the other day picking up his son at my house, and I don't know how we got on the topic, but he was sharing the story after story of just literally miraculously surviving things. And, you know, we're as a family just listening to him, and my kids look over at me and they're like, Dad, he needs to be on the show. And it's funny because I was thinking the exact same thing. So Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, it's good to have you on the show. Daniel, one of the things we start every episode with is just kind of getting to know our guest. So could you give us a little background of where you came from and how you came to meet Jesus?
Sure. Originally came from Moldova, immigrated in 1995.
1995. Okay. All right, it's been a while.
Been here in SAC ever since.
How old were you when you moved?
14. So the way I met Jesus, it was through my father. You know, he was a pastor. He came out from a kind of like a village, and then he decided to open up his own church in the city where we were living. So we practically grew up, you know, knowing Christ, you know, since I was born.
Is this in Moldova?
Moldova. Started off with a very small church. I believe it was about 3 people, and it grew, you know. Then, you know, he decided that, you know, we could move to United States. I apologize. My mom first wanted to move. My dad couldn't because he was a pastor. Then my dad found a different pastor that can take over. Then my mom didn't want, and then so it was on and off about 10 years until we actually made a decision and all came. It was a very long process. You know, but finally we're here.
Now, in Moldova, is Christianity a major religion?
Moldova, you know, like a Soviet Union, they all used to be part of it. So you would see people, it's also based on the Christianity, but more of a like Catholic side. Okay. So they do believe in going to church, but just like Catholics, you know, it's a whole different thing. So when Dad came to that little city, it was a whole new thing. People didn't really understand it, but once they started coming, they clearly started to see the true Jesus, not the one you go into, light up the candle and things like that.
And when you guys moved to the United States, did your dad continue that role as a pastor?
I think maybe it was his time to understand that now is his time to spend more time with the family, because you know that can also be a very hard thing when you start something and you involve in it so much that you just don't see your dad as anybody else anymore, as just a pastor, you know. But you know, I did want some quality time with father. I'm sure all our kids did, you know. So I think it was his time to kind of understand and do something for us now. So that's why we decided to come to the United States.
So Daniel, now you're in the States. I mean, that's a huge transition, I could imagine.
Yeah.
What was that initially like when you guys left Moldova and came here?
Definitely it's not easy. For me, younger, you know, it was probably the most like my friends are there, some of my cousins are there. So at first, you know, you feel like you've been separated from something big, right? But I did learn to become part of America, and this is my home now. never saw that coming though, but then, you just fall in love into the culture because, one thing I was always amazed is that you walk around and people are smiling and you're like, why are you smiling? You don't even know me, Because over there, if you're smiling, there's something wrong with you, It's like you have to be serious, So people would ask me to like, hey, just smile, I'm like why? But here it's awesome, you can say hello to anybody and, they'll say hello back. It's not a crime,
Right.
So definitely.
So when you transitioned here to the United States, was the journey of trying to find a faith community important for you and the family?
There's plenty of churches here. There are Slavic churches. Okay. And at that time, we came to a church that was pretty big. Now they're all divided. I guess they have their own vision. But we found a church and we started to get involved, in the church by doing some, I guess it was like missionary trips to like Fresno. We used to do I think apples or something like that, just kind of like go in as a church and help out.
Yeah.
But soon we found out that, we wanted something better than just a religious kind of church. So we started to go to New Generation Church. It was more of a, you can actually clap now, you can dance, So just get separate for that. Exactly. Because, everything's so serious in churches that, you're not allowed. And you just kind of contain yourself like I want to do something more, I want to show that excitement, by clapping my hands when they're over there debating like if drums are good in the church or not, like, okay, yeah, I think it's time to move. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I read stories in the Old Testament of tambourines and cymbals and like a joyful noise, right?
How can you miss that, right?
Like,
it's right there.
Dancing before the Lord, like David, right? Like, I mean, every culture has their way, but there's nothing wrong with expressing our full emotion before God.
That's right.
Yeah, but keep in mind, they came from the country that it was all communism.
Yeah, exactly.
So, a lot of it was not allowed. Maybe they wanted to, but people would gather in like basements. That's why when they worship it has to be a quiet song. It has to be kind of a more of a depressing song. Exactly. They came from that. So you also have to understand that. But when you still don't grow spiritually and you continue, you stay in the same state, that's what the problem is. Now you're here, it's freedom, right? Mm-hmm. But you coming back to the same idea that, hey, it has to be a certain way.
That's really good. And I think there's a spiritual lesson there too, right? Because the law is a good thing, right? Like we're talking about the Old Testament. The law is a good thing, but we can become bound to it. And then we can't enjoy the freedom in Christ because we are living tied down to legalism. In a sense.
And we're missing out what grace has available for us.
Yeah. There's a joy in the Lord.
Exactly.
There's joy in the Lord. And I guess you to your point, right? That's hard to break free from when it's presented to you. Daniel, the things that we were talking about when you were over with our kids, do you remember how did we come up on the topic of you surviving all these crazy things?
It had something to do with our kids doing something, either jumping and like almost hurting themselves. And I'm the kind of person, like if I see my kid climbing a tree, right, I'm not going to say nothing. My wife would panic, she was like, oh no, don't do that. You're going to fall. I'm like, well, yeah, you're going to do it once and then you'll be careful next time, right? Obviously you have to be, you have to let them do it in a safer way. Yeah. But, I let my kids fall down so they can understand what it is to get up. If you don't do that, they will never learn. You can't protect them all the time. There will be a day where they're going to have to walk on their own. So you have to let them be kids, Yeah, it's just getting hurt in life is part of it. Sometimes you don't see how close we were to getting really hurt, but God opens the eyes and you start to appreciate your good days.
Rob, I jokingly called Daniel a cat. Okay. After he told us all these stories, I'm like, you got nine lives.
Yeah. Oh, I got more than that. When I started counting, it was way past 9.
But this guy got electrocuted Tell us the story. That's the one I just can't forget, man. Like, I think it happened in Moldova.
Yeah. Like most of the stories happen in Moldova.
Okay.
The first time, actually, I remembered that I got electrocuted is that I was in my grandma's house. You guys know the voltage is different there, right?
Yeah.
Because it's 240, I believe, right? Okay. So, and she liked crochet. Is it crochet, right? And I'm looking and I see two metal sticks, like just laying there. I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm walking around and, I turn and I see two holes in the wall. So I'm like, oh, I see things going there. Let me see, right? And I stick those two things right in. Oh, no. That was my first lesson. Don't mess with the power. Yeah, and it was again 240. This, here, it feels like a tickle now. Compared to that, right? But that was my first time that I experienced a little shock.
How old were you when that happened?
I was probably like 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
I don't know, how dangerous is that?
I mean, your heart can stop. Touching it in the wrong way, it definitely it can hurt.
So that was the first and last time.
That was that I actually stuck something in the outlet.
Okay.
Yeah, the second time, the biggest one is where I did not see coming. At that time I was probably like 10, and my mother used to work at a kindergarten. And we've noticed that somebody kept stealing toys from the inside of the building. And we know it's closed during the night, so how are they getting in? And as my mother was outside raking leaves, she was just kind of making it nice and good looking, like front yard where the kids play. I've noticed that the balcony was open. And the way our structures of the building were, they had like a fire ladders attached to the side of the building, which anybody can just hop on and climb up, right? But it was so close to the balcony that you could just reach out and grab the rails. So I'm thinking, okay, this is how they're getting in and stealing the toys. So me being Christian, knowing that, hey, stealing is bad, let me go and close that door. So I started climbing up the ladder. And as soon as I reached over and grabbed the rails, I did not realize that one of the wires from the pole was touching the rail. So when I grabbed it, I grounded myself. So here I am hanging there. I'm feeling like numb throughout my body. I cannot even swallow my saliva, and I'm screaming for my mom to come. And she ran up, and I'm like, okay, I'm letting go, and she goes, all right, let go. So I relax, and of course, with electricity, your whole body tenses up.
Yeah.
And I can't let go because, my hands are just squeezing so tight, and I'm just hanging there. And I kept screaming for as long as I remember, and finally my hands got sweaty, and I slipped. My hand slipped, and I went from the second story. I went down, ended up fracturing a foot. My mom was panicking, so here I am, got shocked by electricity, right? Fell down, fractured my foot, and I got a beating from my mom for scaring her. so that was, I scared her.
Whammy.
Yeah, I scared her really. Yeah. So it was. So, I never held the grudge against my mom. Of course, I knew exactly what she was, but I was happy to be alive, though.
Well, I'm glad that we can laugh about this now.
I know.
Oh, absolutely.
That wasn't funny when it happened,
No,
but
not at the moment.
just thinking about, to me, it's the wildness of what you survived, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Being electrocuted. How long do you think you were being electrocuted for?
I'm sure it seemed like a long time.
Yeah.
But I would say about 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Wow. But again, you can't let go, and until your muscles are so weak,
Yeah.
and they happen to just start to sweat, and that's how I was able to. But it's the grace of God.
Right, yeah, because to put two metal things into an outlet is one thing. To get it from the power line is a completely different thing.
Exactly.
It's a miracle you're still around.
And you don't realize what happened until years go by, and
Yeah.
then, how I started to remember all these stories is just when we go to sleep with my kids. I always started with Anthony and going all the way to Tim. we lay down and, their first thing is like, all right, tell me a story when you were little. They just love those stories, and I'm like, okay, so it just kind of became a thing. We just started to remember a story at a time, and a lot of things started to float up.
Well, now you got me on the edge of my seat because we've already heard 2. And we started this episode by saying that there's 9+ stories of God's grace, the fact that you're here. So what would be another one?
I have little ones and I have the major ones. You guys want the major for the last? Or you want the
build up?
Why don't you tell us a few little ones, before we
All
get
right.
into another major one?
All right. So another little one that happened. I was in my front yard and one of my neighbors made a slingshot. And he just running around, the street, shooting whatever moves, right? And I happened to be moving.
You were the targets.
And I look up on the street and I see him aiming and I'm like, what is he doing? And next thing I know, I felt a metal wire. They used to bend like wires because you don't have like any of the pellets or beads, whatever you're shooting, right?
Yeah.
They would bend like a little wire into like a looking shape, right? And then they'll shoot that. Well, he shot me in the face, and if it was like a hair higher, it would be in my eye.
No way.
Yeah. So that was that burned for a couple of days.
Yeah. So did it get like the side of your face?
It got like right.
Right under your eye.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
If it was a little bit higher, it would have been right in my eye.
Yeah. And you would have probably lost vision,
Absolutely.
right?
I mean, our eye is not, that strong, right?
Yeah.
It's just a puncture and leaks out. That's pretty sensitive.
Oh, man.
And since we're talking about the eye, this one happened here. I used to work construction. We worked laying tile, and before you place a tile on the floor, we used to put like a little guard that goes on the floor so the water doesn't seep through it, just in case there's any water leak. And it's plastic, and it was in a roll. We had to spread it and then staple it down. So as I measured it, I put it on the floor, on one side, it was kind of sticking to the floor. I didn't staple it yet. And then I turned around to place another end of it on the floor. And then I turned back. And at that time, the actual roll came up and hit me in the eye. And that thing is pretty sharp, like at the edges. And suddenly, anywhere I look, I could see in my right eye, I could see like a black spot. And, I'm like, okay, there's something in there. So I ran out to the mirror and I started looking in the mirror, and I could see that there's a part of my eyeball is missing, like right where your pupil is. And it's kind of like a slice, like somebody just sliced something off.
Oh my goodness.
And everywhere I look is black, and I'm like, okay, that's it. Now this time I'm actually going to go blind,
Yeah.
So I'm panicking, I'm calling my doctor, like, hey, I need to come and, get my eye checked out. He's like, okay, we have an appointment in 3 hours. I got home in about an hour. I took a shower. I'm like, okay, and by that time I'm like, okay, it's kind of clearing up, but you could clearly see that like there's like a piece of the eyeball is missing. Okay. It's not round anymore. So by the time I got to a doctor, he started looking with one of his microscopes or whatever he's using, right? He's looking and he's like, all I see is just a tiny scratch. By the time I got to a doctor, it healed.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah. That was a major one.
Wow. Well, so what did that do for your faith?
You can't help it knowing that, in everything that happened, it's God's protection over you.
Yeah.
You would think that when you hear all these stories, and you think like, man, this guy's cursed, right? Well, I look at it the other way. I said, I am blessed.
Wow.
It's not that devil had, actually succeeded at anything, right? He was close, but God was there for me. So
Wow.
I look at it as blessing, not as a curse.
I don't know why this comes to mind, but I think of Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, right? You're like the Roadrunner, right? Like Wile E. Coyote's, the enemy's trying to take you out, and you're just always, nope, not today.
That's right.
Not today.
Half my eyeball's gone. Oh,
there goes.
There's the full eyeball.
Yeah. And in the middle of these things, where was God in it? Like, were you calling out to him? Like when you were being electrocuted, were you calling out to him when you were, trying to get to the doctor? Where was God in it?
And as I was getting electrocuted, I don't think I remember calling out because I was probably still kind of like younger, and didn't really think of it like that.
Okay.
So I called for the closest person, which was my mom.
Right.
But with this, like all these incidents that are happening and, you look at it, you see God's protection. And I'm always thinking, if God is protecting me from all these things, there has to be the end to why it's happening, right?
Yes.
Because, it doesn't make any other sense to be saved from all these little things just to be ungrateful or not fulfill, like a mission that God has for you. And, again, my father was a pastor. So growing up to be Christian, I started to understand that devil does not like that, right? I mean, he wants to take the kids from pastors and leaders, and he wants to make a mockery of that. It's like, hey, you're a pastor, but look at your kids, So I knew that the pressure is stronger on us than it would be on others.
That's so good, Daniel, because I was thinking as you were describing that I think what happens often when, these things happen or don't happen to us, probably because of the establishment of your faith in your family established the foundation of Christ as you were growing up. So when these things were happening, I think a lot of people would think, well, that's just good luck or that's just happenstance. You were in the right place at the right time and this and that, where really what you're saying is, no, this is not like happenstance or good luck. This is the hand of God on your life.
Amen.
Yes.
What would you say to somebody that maybe is listening and saying, well, maybe it's somebody that doesn't know God personally, that would maybe possibly dismiss it as just good luck, but it's not that. What would you say to that person?
Look deeper into what is your life situation is, and, start with seeking the answer from the right source, which is going to be God. Wow. You can't just go to a psychiatrist or somebody that knows people on the human level, but the answer is going to be deep inside your heart. God will reveal that to you in time. I didn't know what was happening to me when I was younger, only to be older to see all the miracles that happened and appreciate it now. Not that, I wasn't thankful, right? But you just don't think of it who is behind all these blessings, right? Yeah. Or savings.
I love that. There's so many thoughts I have right now, man. But the thing that comes to mind is the fact that Jesus is in the constant work of saving people.
Yeah.
Right? He was willing to save you from all these little things so that at some point later in life, you could look back and say, God, I saw your faithfulness in my life. I saw that you saved me. Now your kids are hearing these stories of God's faithfulness in your life, and their faith is being built up. But even beyond that, your kids wouldn't even probably be here if God hadn't saved you so many times in the past. And I'm thinking of my own life. My dad also has a ridiculous amount of how did you survive that? How did you survive that? He went to Vietnam, right? That story in of itself is both tragic, but also miraculous, right? He's had drunk driving accidents, right? If he listens, I hope I'm telling the story correctly, but he's had a car up in San Francisco. There's a lot of hills, right? They went off a street onto down and landed in the second story of another house, car sticking out of the, that kind of thing back in the, the 60s or whatever, right? They fell into a creek underwater, I think, and they got out, just miraculous thing after miraculous thing. And if my dad hadn't survived every single one of those things unharmed, I wouldn't be around. And if I wasn't around, there would be no Jesus in My Life podcast, right? And that's just one small little thing of how God is, he's working. His plan is so beyond what we can think or imagine. Right. And so I'm thinking Daniel, you might not even realize God was there in the moment, but he's saving you for a purpose.
Yes.
And it may not even be for your life. It may be for the life of so many other people.
I'm thinking the same. It might not make sense to me. So when I pray, I say, Lord, whatever I'm going through, give me strength to go through this. but then also give me understanding why, so that way it, maybe I don't need to know, because if I know, something would change, right? But again, just because I don't get the answer doesn't mean that I have to put my hands down.
Yeah.
So I have to keep going, whatever it is. If Lord decides to reveal it to me, it will be revealed. But like you said, if it's not for my life, but it's going to be for my kids' life, so they can be a testimony to something.
Love it. All right. Well, we got a couple stories. Let's hear another one.
All right. Well, since you talked about, drowning, like almost drowning right there.
Yeah.
Almost drowned myself as well. Just didn't know how to swim, fell off the tube. That was just a small shock that I received when I fell in the water, and I started moving my legs and arms so hard. Man, I was thinking of halfway off the water. Break through the ice one time, just fell through, got out fast enough, but it was up to my knees. So almost fell through the ice.
Ice into like a lake?
Lake.
Okay.
So we used to cross the lake. It would be a big shortcut during the winter to get to school and back, So as I was crossing, fell through. Like the ice was pretty thin by then.
Wow.
Yeah, but if you go under, right? If you go under and the current takes you, you
don't know where to come out, because it's not like you have a whole bunch of holes that you can come out from.
Wow.
So that could have been a disaster.
Wow.
Funny one. I was in my music class one time, and somehow I took a pencil or pen apart, and it had like a bunch of small parts. So I'm like, okay, that looks pretty cool. And one of them looked like it was a small tube, just kind of like a piece of a pen. And, we're all sitting over there, I'm like, wonder how that would sound if I put it in my ear.
Oh, man.
No. So I did, I'm like, it sounds kind of horrible, So I went to pull it out, and instead of pulling it out, I pushed it in.
Oh.
And every time I go to reach for it, I keep pushing it in. And, it was pretty deep in there, so I'm like, man, like, what am I going to do? I can't tell mom. So, me not doing that, years go by.
Oh,
yes. And I come to United States, and
no
up we go.
Way.
Yes. And every time I would kind of feel my ear, I could feel it pressing up against my eardrum. But I came to the United States. I already forgot about it, because, you get used to things that they're bothering you, right? You just get used to it. So I came for a checkup. Everybody does a checkup once you come to the United States, do a physical. And you can just see a doctor, that he's looking in your mouth, in your nose, and then he looks in one ear. Then he kind of takes a pause there, right? Then he looks in my other ear, like, okay. Then he comes back to that second ear. He goes, what's that? And I'm like, oh, that happened back in when I was in school, So he's like, okay, well, we got to pull it out. He tried to pull it out, and it's already been so long that it kind of grew into my ear.
Oh my goodness!
So they had to pour some liquids in there. I was in the office just soaking it in, and finally they came out, and they were pulling, and they pulled it out. So he looked at it. He said, if it was a little bit longer, you would have been dead.
Yeah. Wow. You know what keeps coming to mind? Jesus says, seeing, they don't see, and hearing, they don't hear, right? But you had the opposite. Your vision was trying to be taken away. Your hearing was trying to be taken away, and God preserved your eyesight and your hearing.
Well, since you talk about, ear, the eye, let's talk about my tongue.
Oh my goodness.
What's it going about every facial body part?
Yeah. If you look right now, there's a huge cut, right? Well, I used to be walking around and with my tongue pulled out when I was younger. I don't remember this, but this is what my mom was telling me. And something happened. I fell down, and I almost bit my tongue off.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, so it was hanging by the thread, and mom said that I could not eat solid foods. She had to do like smoothies and, just something that I can just swallow without chewing.
Wow.
Daniel, I'm pretty sure your mom, you were just a special project in prayer, right? Like she's like, that kid's going to kill himself. I got to pray for him every day.
I should have been walking around in a bubble wrap.
Oh my goodness.
No way. So you almost lost your eyes. You almost lost your hearing. You almost lost your tongue.
There was a time where I ride a bicycle with no brakes.
Surprise.
Yeah. And I was going down the bridge, and before all these regulations, the codes were there, they were pretty steep, So I'm going down, and there's somebody standing in the way, and I have to slow down. Well, let me just stick my foot into a front wheel so I can brake, right?
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, no.
I fall down with my chin first. Then I try to stop myself with the hand, and my bicycle hits me right in my hand, fracturing it. So we go to a doctor, and, we do an x-ray. He comes in, he's like, okay, well, it's not dislocated, it's just a fracture. But I see him feeling in between my bones on my hand, right? And I'm like, what is he feeling there? And then I remembered that when I was younger, my uncle had 2 hammers. And he was just smashing the hammers together. And it's like, oh, man, that's pretty cool. It bounces back out, Well, a piece of the hammer flies off and hits me right in the hand. So at that time, we thought, well, maybe just broke the skin and the blood's coming out. Well, that's whatever. We felt it. Didn't feel like there was anything there. Well, he was actually looking for it. The doctor was actually looking for it. He's like, there's something in your hand. And I'm like, oh, okay. He showed me the x-ray. The metal piece is still there. Oh. Now, the miracle in that is that, things being rusty, right?
Yeah, tetanus, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, you look at all those stories and you're like, there's no way God's protection wasn't on your life. Because as soon as you said metal in your hand for years, I was like, oh, tetanus, right? Like even the thing you had in your ears, that should have got infected.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
I had my head busted open with a rock, just as kids, The major one that happened to me, which, I think that was a big awakening call for me, seeing how great the miracle is. I was driving from work on my Honda Civic. It was my first car. I was excited and stupid at the same time because back in the day it was cool not to wear a seatbelt, okay? Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys knew that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So going down the streets, it was like an empty street, but it was kind of like, going 65 miles per hour. No seatbelt, and my friend was driving behind me, so we're both coming from work. And I see 2 vehicles line up on the yellow middle divider, trying to make a left turn. And the first one calculated like, okay, I have enough time, right? So the first car made it through. The second one did not even check and comes right in front of me. All I could do is cover my forehead and lock my left hand onto the steering wheel. The crash was so big that my front end was gone, like it was completely smashed. My rear end of the car buckled, like basically I T-boned a different vehicle. Gotcha. The friend was driving behind me, and he saw all that.
Oh, wow.
So the adrenaline was so high, I could see the windshield crack in a slow motion. It was just like it was slowed down. Yeah. And, as soon as the accident happened, I put my seatbelt on. And I'm thinking, it's over, bro. Like, why?
I mean, you should have flown out of that car with no seatbelt, right?
In pieces, probably, you know. But I come out of the car. It's already getting dark. My friend comes out to me. He's like, Daniel, I could have swore you were dead.
Yeah.
Like the accident was so hard. The other car flipped on its roof and just skidded across the street. And I just spun around. He's like, I promise you, I thought you were dead.
Yeah.
And I'm standing there, not a scratch on me. Police officers come. They flash their lights on the car. And they're asking people questions like, hey, who was driving the car? Because I'm standing in the crowd, though. And I raised my hand. I said, hey, it was me. And he looks at me. He looks at the car. He said, are you okay? I said, yeah. He looks at the car again, looks at me with a flashlight. He said, are you sure? I said, yeah. Yeah, that was a huge one.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a miracle.
That's straight up.
Yeah, and there wasn't airbags back then, right?
You have to understand Russian community that if you don't have to, it's not going to be there to save money, right?
Yeah.
And now for me, it's a lesson where seatbelt first.
Yeah.
Cars have to have airbags.
Yeah.
Safety.
Again, reminds me of my dad. My dad, this is probably 15, maybe even 20 years ago. He was driving on Highway 1 before the Golden Gate Bridge area in San Francisco. And he got in a really bad accident, and the car completely totaled, like a can squished together. Mm-hmm. And my dad, again, not a scratch on him, totally fine. He said during the accident, he felt like some big arms came around him and hugged him. Like he was enveloped by something, right? And I truly believe God sent an angel and said, okay, you're going to be his shield, And I think the same was for you. God shielded you from the damage that you should have had in that accident.
Absolutely.
That should have taken your life.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're probably excited about meeting your guardian angel someday.
Are they excited to meet you though? They're like, Daniel, I have worked so much overtime on you. You owe me lunch, buddy.
Man, oh my goodness. I can't wait for that reunion.
Maybe he has a couple, right?
I think so. I think it's not just one.
I think they take turns, right?
It's like your turn to deal with this one.
I just imagine they're taking their orders for the day and everybody's crossing their fingers. Not Daniel, not Daniel, not Daniel.
Well, it was me last week, right?
Oh, wow. Daniel, you said something earlier that I think is very profound, and I'd like for you to speak a little bit more into it. You said God wants to show you who he is as he walks you through it. And obviously that's the many, things that God has just been so faithful to protect you and to show you himself through all of this. I think the tendency for us as we talk about Jesus in our life is we get frustrated because we don't want God to help us through it. We want God to take it away. And so I asked this question earlier, which, your faith is real because of every single circumstance after another where you've seen the hand of God literally on your life. Fast forward to who you are in Christ today, how that has just been like the light of Jesus radiates from you because of all of these, specific circumstances and situations where you've seen the hand of God on you. Your faith is more than just in your head. It's more than theory. It's like your life. It's a lifestyle. Your faith in Christ is a lifestyle. It's almost like God has this calling on your life to just keep proclaiming the faithfulness of God and his hand on you, and how that's just been so incredibly influential as you live out your faith. How has if you can maybe even repeat it, or if there's anything else that you'd like to add because of your life and God's faithfulness, how that then just sort of just oozes out of you because the faith in Christ is as real as can be.
Yeah, and I think it molds you into a person, right? Something that we're all different, but in some way we can relate to each other, right? Just being who I am, it might not even have to be something major, right? Something like me being behind the pulpit and giving this great sermon. It can be daily things that you do that can influence others. Working for Walmart, I remember. And it was, just being me, just being out there working hard, just as much as I could, not saying no to anybody, and, just talking to my coworkers, they would always pause and then listen. It's like, well, how do you know all this? And I don't have an answer for it, to me, it was common sense, but I'm thinking, what if the things that you do on your daily lives individually change others? Mm-hmm. So it could be for that. It could be for kids, like Jack mentioned earlier. I don't have an honest, clear answer for what exactly this thing is, but it could be for my daily life to be a help or, influence somebody in a way. It's so great for me to see. Like I was a Sunday school teacher before in our church. Now I'm back in it again. But, going through Sunday schools, working with kids, and now you see them on the stage and they're like, praying for people. You're part of it, right? So that makes you feel good that you were actually there. And, you were not there to discipline them, but you were there to just have a conversation, right? So I think it's just on a daily basis, God is using you for a specific, you might not even know, who or what it is, but you're there for a purpose. So even if I don't have a big painting in front of me, I'm pretty sure that there's things that happen that I'm not aware of. And I'm okay with that. I don't have to know every little thing that I did or influence, right? If God uses me, then I'm here.
That's so good.
I love it.
Well, Daniel, thanks so much for being on the show today and for sharing your stories. I'm sure that we'll have to do a part 2 someday to hear.
I got more.
You got more.
I got more.
Definitely got more. But the foundation of Jesus in My Life podcast comes from the story in Luke chapter 8, where Jesus approaches this man who has been cast out of society, out of the culture, because he's more than crazy. He's literally demonically oppressed and possessed, and they've got him chained outside the city because he's just unsafe to people and to himself. And there was like no hope for him. And Jesus approaches him and literally saves him, delivers him, gives him freedom, frees him from this demonic oppression and possession. And his life is forever changed in that moment. And he realizes that he has been set free. And he looks at Jesus and he says, I want to now follow you. I want to walk with you physically. And Jesus tells him, no, I want you to go back to your family and tell them all that I've done for you. Now, I could imagine that many of those stories that he had before Christ and then right after Christ, it was endless. And so because he had all of this in his life, Jesus had set him free. He wanted to tell more than just his family. He told like the whole town and anybody that would listen. I can't wait to meet that man someday because, we get to probably hear the extended version of those stories. And I guess you could say with that man, the rest is history. And that's really the foundation of this podcast, for people to share, give them the platform to share God's faithfulness. And I'm just so grateful that, I got to meet you today and that our listeners got to meet you and share story after story of God's faithfulness in your life. I just really believe that the best is yet to come. Like this is like just the beginning because God's never done with us until he calls us home or he comes back. And so thank you so much. It was a privilege to hear your stories and to meet you. Thank you for being on our show.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah, it's been a real honor to have you, Daniel. And just one additional thought, Rob, as you were sharing that story that we share so often about that man, I wonder how many times he thought, how am I still even alive before he met Jesus, right? He was the crazy of crazies. He was uncontainable. He would cut himself. Like he should have died multiple times. Surprised that other people didn't kill him, right? Because he was such a nuisance. His life was preserved and it was for a purpose. In the end, his life was going to glorify Jesus, because this is what Jesus rescued me from. And so Jesus has rescued you, Daniel. It's clear as day.
Walking
miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Walking miracle.
Yeah. So thank you. And everybody else, stay tuned every Tuesday for new episodes. God bless. And now a reflection on today's interview. As I was editing Daniel's episode, I ran across this sermon clip by T.F. Tenney, a pastor, preacher of 67 years, who is coming out of a period of extreme suffering and pain. And I thought the most appropriate thing to close this episode with is to play a portion of this sermon by T.F. Tenney, titled The Power of Pain. I hope it speaks to you as much as it spoke to me. And if you're interested, I've included a link to the complete sermon in the show notes. God bless you and have a great week.
Sometimes God delivers you from the fire furnace, and other times he just makes you fireproof and let it burn on. Because he knows you're going to learn something out of this pain, that it's going to produce power. I wanted to preach something else. I'd rather preach something else. But the Holy Spirit just kept whispering to me, the power of pain. They've got to get a new attitude toward what pain can do. It is not authorized to destroy them. It is authorized to make them. God is more concerned with our development than he is with our comfort.
Thank you for listening to Jesus in My Life. New episodes release every Tuesday. Subscribe on your preferred podcasting platform so you don't miss a single episode. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please consider sharing this podcast with a friend or family member. If you would like to help our visibility online, consider rating us and posting a review on Apple Podcast. Have an awesome Jesus in My Life story? Contact us at jesusinmylifepodcast@gmail.com.